By the dawn of 1809, the tides of European history had shifted dramatically under the indomitable force of one man, Napoleon Bonaparte. Once a revolutionary general from a small Mediterranean island, Napoleon had cast aside the old order, forged a new empire, and crowned himself as master of the continent. His rise sent shockwaves from Madrid to Moscow. Monarchs schemed behind gilded doors, soldiers marched beneath banners bearing the imperial N, and ordinary people from Lisbon to Warsaw felt the weight of his ambitions change their world forever. It was a rule born in fire and sustained by steel. Napoleon's Grande Armée, hardened in the crucible of a decade's war, was the strongest fighting force Europe had ever seen. At the famed Battle of Wagram in July 1809, this army delivered one of its bloodiest victories, facing the combined might of Austria's finest soldiers. Over 2 days, amidst booming cannons and choking smoke, more than 80,000 men became casualties in a brutal struggle for dominance. When the guns fell silent, the field belonged to Napoleon, and with it, the fate of the Austrian Empire was once again sealed. The vanquished met their conqueror in Vienna's grand halls, where, in October 1809, the Treaty of Schönbrunn humiliated the Habsburg crown. Austria lost vast swaths of territory and paid crippling reparations, but Napoleon sought more than mere revenge. In 1810, he orchestrated a union of politics and power, divorcing his longtime love Josephine and marrying Archduchess Marie-Louise of Austria. The daughter of his former enemy, she would birth Napoleon's long-awaited heir, adding the aura of legitimacy to his rapidly built dynasty. Across the ever-shifting map of Europe, Napoleon's grip seemed absolute. He ruled France directly, yet the tentacles of his influence stretched far beyond. Brothers and marshals became kings, Joseph in Spain, Louis in Holland, Jérôme in Westphalia, and Murat in Naples. 16 German states formed the Confederation of the Rhine, standing as Napoleon's buffer against Prussian and Austrian might. Switzerland, Poland, and Italy became loyal satellites. At its height, the empire enveloped over 70 million people. But beneath the surface, the seeds of crisis were sown. Economic war against Britain, Napoleon's great maritime rival, had become a battle of attrition, known as the continental system. By closing Europe's ports to British goods, Napoleon hoped to starve Britain into submission. Yet the British Navy's relentless blockade strangled French trade. Smuggling flourished in the shadows, draining the French treasury and fomenting resentment among merchant classes. Nowhere did the illusion of control unravel faster than in Spain. Having replaced the Spanish king with his brother Joseph, Napoleon believed the peninsula could be managed like any other province. Instead, his rule provoked a nationwide guerrilla war unprecedented in its ferocity. Peasant fighters harassed French columns, sabotaged supplies, and struck with ruthless ingenuity, turning every village and mountain pass into a battlefield. Their resistance drew support from an unlikely quarter, a disciplined British army under Arthur Wellesley, later known as the Duke of Wellington. Through calculated retreats, carefully chosen battles, and scorched-earth policies, Wellesley and his Spanish allies turned the peninsula into a bleeding wound for France. By 1812, more than 300,000 French troops were bogged down in the relentless grind of Iberian warfare. Napoleon's manpower was stretched thin. Worse yet, trouble brewed in the east as Russia began to chafe under French economic impositions and renewed its trade with Britain. Confrontation was inevitable. In the summer of 1812, Napoleon assembled the largest multinational army Europe had ever seen, over 600,000 men, drawn from every corner of his empire and its client states, and marched into Russia with dreams of a quick, decisive victory. His foes, Tsar Alexander I and his generals, would not oblige. They withdrew steadily, burning fields, villages, and supplies before the French could reach them. The land itself became a weapon, denying Napoleon the battle he hungered for. It finally came at Borodino, a place soaked in blood by nightfall. On September 7th, Russians and French alike fell by the tens of thousands. Though Napoleon stood on the field when the smoke cleared, he had won little beyond heaps of lifeless bodies. A week later, he entered Moscow, expecting submission and peace. Instead, he found ghostly silence. Fires soon swept the city, leaving little refuge for his men. With winter descending and no surrender forthcoming, Napoleon ordered his retreat. What began as an orderly withdrawal soon became a horror. Plummeting temperatures, hunger, ceaseless harassment by Russian soldiers and partisans, and the loss of horses and supplies turned the retreat into a nightmare. At the Berezina River, a desperate crossing under enemy fire shattered the remnants of his army. Less than 1/6 of the original Grand Armée crawled back to friendly territory, many broken beyond repair. Word of this catastrophe raced across Europe. Prussia, scenting opportunity, broke from its forced alliance and joined Russia against France. Sweden, under the remarkable Charles John, once Napoleon's own Marshal Bernadotte, joined the coalition. Even Austria, initially hesitant, prepared for war. In 1813, Napoleon summoned one last reserve of energy and willpower, raising swaths of young conscripts, the Marie-Louise, to defend his embattled throne. Though still a tactical genius, he faced mounting odds and armies led by a new generation of skilled enemies. Early victories at Lutzen and Bautzen showed flashes of his old brilliance, but the coalition was learning. They declined to face him directly, instead wearing down his stretched forces and striking at his overmatched subordinates. With Austria's formal entry into the conflict, the scale tipped definitively. At the colossal Battle of Leipzig in October 1813, called the Battle of Nations, Napoleon's 200,000 soldiers were crushed by a coalition of 330,000 Russians, Prussians, Austrians, and Swedes. In the chaos, his Saxon allies changed sides mid-battle, and the French retreat became a rout, made worse by the premature destruction of the only bridge across the Ulster. Thousands died as the Grande Armée, battered and diminished, staggered back toward France. As the Allied armies surged over the Rhine in early 1814, Napoleon's world contracted. With less than 70,000 men, he faced a relentless invasion on multiple fronts. Despite tactical masterpieces in the 6 Days campaign, the enemy's superiority in numbers made resistance futile. By spring, Paris itself fell to the coalition. Bereft of options and deserted by his marshals, Napoleon abdicated at Fontainebleau. In exile on Elba, Napoleon looked back at the continent he had commanded and the empire he built and lost in such spectacular fashion. Europe's monarchs redrew the map at the Congress of Vienna, determined to avoid the chaos of another Napoleonic age. Yet, even in defeat, Napoleon's legacy endured. His legal reforms, his administrative innovations, and the nationalist aspirations awakened by his campaigns. His empire, constructed in the name of order and glory, fell not just to external enemies, but to the limits of power, the unforeseen strength of local resistance, and the perils of hubris. A legend was born, not merely of conquest, but of ambition's price. Napoleon had once claimed that imagination rules the world. More than 2 centuries later, the imagination still returns again and again to the meteoric rise and fall of this singular figure whose dream shaped the fate of Europe, and whose shadow lingers still. If you enjoyed this historical journey, please support our channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to click the bell icon.